We as humans have never been able to accept the truth that future is unpredictable. Thomas Hobbes, the 17th century English philosopher, considered by many to be one of the founders of the modern political philosophy, said, "The best prophets are the best guessers." We want to have the knowledge of the future. We want to know what will happen. We want to get prepared, and we want to be ready for it. So we as human beings are not wired to deal with uncertainty. So when we talk of living with uncertainty, to my mind, the best person that we can talk to is a soldier. I'm delighted that today we have amongst us Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain. Now, he's had a 40 years illustrious career in the Indian Army, and there is so much to say about him that I have actually had to put down his CV. So let me introduce you, General.
Thank you.
So most of his 40 years illustrious career, he has served in really turbulent environments, hotspots, from Sri Lanka to Siachen, from Northeast Indian states to Jammu and Kashmir, and UN operations in Mozambique to Rwanda. He has served 7 tours in J&K. He commanded the Indian Army's Srinagar-based 15 Corps. He's much sought after as a speaker and writes for major Indian newspapers. And of course, he is a very regular participant in TV debates on many of these issues. And he's been in the forefront of leading this initiative of, more to say, US-style scholar warrior concept for the Indian Army. He is a distinguished fellow of the Vivekanand International Foundation and Center for Joint Warfare Studies, and is on the governing council of the Indian Council of World Affairs. He speaks on national security issues at various military, civil services, and corporate institutions, and with a view to enhance India's strategic culture. In July of 2018, he was appointed by the President of India as the Chancellor of the Central University in J&K. And early this year, he was appointed as member of the National Disaster Management Authority, the NDMA of India. With an intent to bring national security-oriented strategic culture to India's corporate world, General Hasnain has been engaged with major companies and corporate institutions, just to name a few. State Bank of India, Reliance, Ashok Leyland, Larsen Toubro, Mindtree, Deutsche Bank, Deloitte, KPMG, Knight Frank, Sanofi, and the Indian American Chamber of Commerce. General Hasnain has 6 decorations awarded by the President of India and 2 by the Army Chief. So you can see, General has had a huge experience all these years of dealing with very difficult situations and in very difficult circumstances. So my first question to you, General, is, you are a 2nd generation officer. A career in Army was known to you to be full of uncertainties, unpredictability. You are exposed to death, all sorts of exposure to grievous injury, frequent postings and moves. So how come that you decided to join the Army, knowing all that?
Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you for having me on your program today. And let me respond to your first question by saying that there are 2 things perhaps with the profession that I decided to join. Number 1, there is an element of romanticism attached to it. And the second is, as you correctly yourself said, unpredictability. I think the 2 merge together extremely well. And besides the fact that in India in particular, very little is known about the profession of arms. Most people look at it only from the glamour of the uniform, and don't understand what really goes into making a soldier. So, although I am a second generation officer and I saw the army from a grandstand view, despite that, I really didn't know what I was coming into. I can say with some degree of certainty that I thought that perhaps you may not have to study too hard in the army. But I realized that I have only been studying throughout the last 40 years that I served in the army. So that is what brought me in here. You can say unpredictability itself brought me here.
Wow. That's great. I wanted to ask you something. How did you feel when the first time you are fired upon, when you are under threat of death?
That's an interesting question. It's expected from a soldier, and particularly the arm that I joined the infantry. It was a foot soldiering, absolutely in the face of the enemy, the face of every possible threat which comes your way. And I remember there are grades of such threat which came my way. It all started very early. Perhaps they were not very life-threatening. But the first time I really came into a major life-threatening situation was in Poonch, on the line of control. I still felt that those days the line of control was not so much on fire, and perhaps the security of my bunker and the walls around my bunker was good enough to prevent anything happening, besides the team spirit of my soldiers with me. It was in Sri Lanka, in Operation Pawan, in counterinsurgency operations against a very well-trained terrorist organization such as the LTTE, that I actually faced death for the first time. And it was not it was a question of being maimed by mines. It was a question of being taken prisoner and perhaps beheaded, and or just shot up in an ambush or a counter ambush. I would say that the initial feeling is really no feeling at all, because the moment you're fired upon, you tend to go to ground and you realize that you are responsible for a body of maybe 70, 80, 90 men. Everyone has gone to ground. And if someone doesn't put his head up and start giving directions, then everyone is going to remain rooted to the ground, which is likely to be very, I think, dangerous for the organization, for the men that you are leading. So I had to put up my head. And that is it was just the demand of the situation. It was my own honor, it was my own pride which made me put up my head, frankly saying. I would say famous Sam Manekszaw's very famous saying that every man is afraid. If you're not afraid, then you are probably a Gurkha. That's what he always said. That a Gurkha doesn't know what is danger.
What is fear?
What is fear? So I feared for my death. I feared the possibility of a bullet hitting me. But I think it was the sheer honor and pride and the fact that my men were looking at me and they were all around me, that I had to put up my head and make sure that I got up and went to the nearest cover and gave directions from there. So even in the face of uncertainty of this kind, many times it is basic human values which drive you to do these things. And in this case, honor and pride was one of the very important things. And as you said in the beginning, being a second generation officer, that honor and pride was even more important because I was commanding troops who had been commanded by my father at one time.
Yeah, you just spoke about your men and the responsibility you carry for your men as an officer leading them. And I know that you served in Siachen for a long time, and you have, it's probably one of the most dangerous places in the world, because if someone were to fall into a crevice, the person can never be pulled out, forget about pulling out alive. So how do you handle that? I mean, how do you deal with these situations where your men are put in such life-threatening situations? I mean, what steps do you take? What practices do you follow?
I compliment you for your choice of the area which you selected to ask me about. Because more than any area that I have served in, and I've served in lots and lots of very dangerous sectors of where the Indian Army is deployed, I think Siachen by far is perhaps the most dangerous. Here is the dual danger on the time when I commanded. It was the dual danger of the adversary and the second enemy, that is climate. General Winter, as they talk about. I think the greatest thing that you can do to your soldiers in terms of welfare is to train them hard and train them well. I think that is the first essence which I ensured, that they were well trained. The second aspect of it is not to be no bravado, I would say. You see, a soldier by nature over a period of time tends to he starts shunning fear. And then bravado comes in, confidence comes in, and that confidence brings bravado. I would say Glacier is one place where there should be just no bravado. There's a very famous saying in Ladakh. It says, in the land of Lama, don't be Gama.
Okay.
Right? Gama, if you remember, the very
Gama
famous
the Gama Pahalwan.
Pahalwan, if you remember.
Yes.
So if you are up there in the land of the Lamas, don't try to be a Gama Pahalwan. Go carefully, go slowly, and there's nothing wrong in it. Because that is what will ensure you save your lives, and look for an opportunity and a moment when loss of lives will actually give you a major strategic or tactical advantage. No point losing lives for nothing. So that is one other aspect which I always prevailed upon, making sure. The last bit I would say is communication to your men. The more you speak to your men, the more you meet your men. I think that ensures that your directions are all followed to the T.
So in fact, just as a continuation of that question is that when all this is happening around you and you're looking at frontline, you're looking at anti-terrorist operations, how do you keep your focus as a leader? What motivates you in that sense? How do you keep your own focus?
This is a $1 million question always, and it all depends on the level at which you are functioning. I can say as a brigade commander on the line of control, 3 units under my command, about 50 kilometers of frontage, 50 to 60 kilometers of frontage, relatively simpler to keep your focus because there's a front, there is a rear, there is the enemy, there is the weather, the climate, all kinds of things. There are terrorists around you. As you rise in service, this aspect of the focus becomes very difficult. As a corps commander, I can say that my schedule for almost 2 years was morning 5:30 to night 1:30. I slept 4 hours a night, maybe 6 days a night, and then recharged my batteries on the 7th day. But in this 20 hours, there was a tremendous amount of activity which went on. And you have to keep your mind rested sufficiently to be able to focus on that. I went to the line of control. I inspected my troops there, spoke to them. I walked on the line of control during the day, got back by helicopter, landed somewhere else, came to office, listened to my briefings. There were visitors who were coming to meet me. I went and visited and met VIPs perhaps. Evening there were files coming home, and then there were social activities. My God, it's something to be really involved in this, in the command responsibility of a corps such as the Srinagar-based 15 Corps. But in the middle of all that, you have to be clear, what is my aim? What is my aim? All this is ultimately going to focus you onto your aim. And I still remember that when I went to Kashmir, I asked a lot of people, what is my aim? And most people could never define my aim to be.
Why I am here.
Why am I here?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Someone told me, go and kill a lot of terrorists. I said, look here, I've killed terrorists all my life. I don't have to now come back as a corps commander to kill terrorists. So I evolved my own aim, which remained my focus. My aim was to integrate or mainstream the state of Jammu and Kashmir to the rest of India, politically, socially, economically, and psychologically. At the end of the day, when the last Kashmiri says Jai Hind, I have won the battle. That was my focus with which I worked.
I actually wanted to sort of maybe conclude the conversation and in a way for asking you, General, what would be the 3 most important things that we in the civilian corporate world can learn from the soldiers about living a life of uncertainty? What are the 3 things that you think are important?
No doubt, a soldier lives a life of uncertainty at all times. I would say one of the very major things which a soldier imbibes is faith. Faith in the unknown, perhaps itself, faith in God. And that is what keeps him driven. And the rare thing about the Indian soldier is the aspect that it is not just his own faith, it is the larger syncretic faith. And I would love to always tell people that, see, as an Indian Army soldier, I consider myself, well, born a Muslim, educated a Christian, belonging to a pure Hindu regiment, where my soldiers were all Hindu, I was the only Muslim. And the last, I had a very large number of Sikh friends in my circle. So it is this aspect of syncretism. In fact, when you're climbing up to Siachen Glacier, there is a cave there called the Opi Baba Cave. And there is a single pennant, in fact there's a single pole on which 4 flags of the 4 major faiths of India are put together. And everyone who goes up to the glacier actually salutes that cave and goes past. That is the kind of faith that the soldier has, which really ensures perfectionism, focus, everything. The second aspect is, I would say, trust. Now, faith is on one hand, this trust is in your leadership, the trust in your colleagues, the trust in your equipment, most importantly, the trust in your nation. I think a soldier who doesn't trust will continue, he just cannot give his best. He will continue to always suspect. And suspicion is something which just cannot work in the profession of soldiering. And the last of the traits I would put is failure. Fear of failure. The fear of failure drives a lot of people. But I think in the army, what we have to be very sure about is there may be failure somewhere, but you have to ensure that you find the means to overcome that failure. You may fail in a mission, but thereafter convert that failure into a success. I think the classic cases of Kargil, where we lost due to an intelligence failure or whatever you may say, we lost a large tract of ground. But we went back and captured it. And with what losses? Without questioning anything. People just went up. In 2 months, we recaptured at the loss of 527 lives. I think that is one of the major lessons the outside world can take from the soldiers.
So in terms of then for corporate leaders, I mean, what will be the message for corporate leaders?
For corporate leaders, I would say, once again, I would come back to trust as one of the things. Trust your men, trust your organization, trust yourself and your capabilities. I would also say, look at the entire aspect of competence. You see, collaborative leadership in the armed forces also, a lot of people think that it is all dictatorial. But actually, leadership in the armed forces is also very collaborative. You do a lot of consultation because it's such a complex situation which you normally come across. And I think that's a major lesson which the world outside, or the corporate world, can take from us. And the last of them is, no action in the army or the armed forces can be transactional. To think that you are on a 9-to-5 job, or to think that commanding men means that you sign on the dotted line and say that this is the amount of work I will do, it just doesn't work. So I suppose the one big thing from the armed forces that the corporate world can take is transformational leadership. That until the job is done, until the task is achieved, you will be at it. You will find every possible means of achieving it. It can't be left to that I did my best and I failed.
Yeah, so I want to ask you something, and that's probably in a way, the last question, because in our civilian corporate world, we are so concerned with our KRAs, key responsibility areas, key performance indicators. And that drives a lot, what your power is and what your authority is. And I've always wondered, what is the KRA of a soldier?
This is an interesting
What
question.
is a KPI of a soldier,
See, at the beginning of every year, in our usual functioning, the beginning of every year, every organization publishes its key result areas, as we call it, in the army, KRAs. And these are supposed to be single statements or maybe just single words, 3-4 of them. For example, in the year 2021, the KRA of the Corps Commander in Kashmir is stability on the line of control, control on infiltration, an enhanced percentage of support from the civil population. 3 KRAs he laid out for himself. Now he draws from it what are the various aspects that he has to achieve these finally. And then, of course, taking it backwards, you come to a subset of factors which you will then convert into doables, tasks for your troops. Not too many. The worst thing is to try and draw out too many KRAs and too many doables. The best is a correct mix, a balance, 4-5 of them, and hope like hell that you can put your focus and effort. You asked me right at the beginning about focus. Now, there is so much to do and the complexity is so high, if you don't have the clarity of mind to draw out the right KRAs, you will be floundering and you'll be putting your focus and attention on the wrong things. I think this is one of the very important aspects of being a strategic leader in the corporate world or in the military world, where the identification of the KRAs, drawing out the doables, the factors from that, and passing it on to your men, that is the essence of it.
So, if you think of it, that for a lot of us, the thought that the future, that we have no control over the future, it's completely out of our hands. And we, as Homo sapiens, we've been wired in a way that we can't deal with uncertainty. We all want security. So from that perspective, if you don't know what's coming tomorrow, how do you use your today? What do you do today in terms of worrying too much about the uncertainty or trying to do something?
I think it's a very interesting and a very important question at the end. The whole issue is actually how to reduce that uncertainty. Because we know we are living in an uncertain world. COVID-19 today, for example, you're living with COVID-19, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Every other day you get a WhatsApp message, so-and-so has died or so-and-so is in hospital. When is it going to hit you? You don't know. I think in terms of the army, my question is how to reduce that uncertainty. To attempt to reduce the uncertainty is number one, I must get the best of intelligence. Whatever, you will never get 100% intelligence. Whatever percentage of intelligence you get, how to ensure that you interpret it correctly. And that interpretation only comes from background knowledge, right? Your control on the nerves as far as the situation is concerned, right? And ensuring that you give the best training to your men, to your officers and your men, the best possible resources that are there. When all this is in place, then you know that you have to a great extent reduced the uncertainty of the situation. Now whatever may happen, you've got something with which you can still respond. The response part of it then minimizes. It is the preparation which is more important. Today, I am in an organization called the National Disaster Management Authority. In the yesteryears, the disaster in India meant you wait for the disaster and then respond, go in with relief, do some kind of welfare work and things like that and come back. Today, that whole concept is gone. Today, it's all about preparedness. It's all about mitigation. It's all about early warning. It's the use of technology to give you that early warning. You've seen the recent 2 cyclones we've had in Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry. We've had no casualties, virtually no casualties. While in 1999, we lost 10,000 people in Odisha to a major cyclone. This is the aspect of reducing uncertainty through professional preparedness?
Thank you. Wonderful, General Hasnain. Thanks so much for sharing your experiences and your very insightful thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And we do hope that we'll be sharing more podcasts in the future on many issues which surround us and our lives. Thank you very much.